You can go ahead and get started. Just raise your hand. I'll try to keep staff. And if your question is directed to someone in particular or just to the whole panel, please be sure to state that.
Yeah, my question is for Howard. How much do you know about the Campus Tree USA designation and that 5 or 6 person board that's required to get that designation? What function do they serve?
So we have a campus tree committee. So it's chaired by our head of landscape services. His name is Hyacinth Hyde. And I've got people from facilities, from my office, students, faculty sit on that committee, and they meet once a month. And they put together meeting minutes, they put an agenda together, meeting minutes, and circulate that to not only the attendees, but our senior administration, our AVP for facilities, and our executive vice president for administration and finance. So everybody understands what's going on and it's on people's radar. Our director of sustainability sits on that. Our landscape architect sits on that. So it's a pretty broad group of folks, representatives.
But is it serve more as an advisory board, or do they actually have any kind of legislative ability when they review site plans, or?
The landscape services folks reviews, all of our landscape projects, and they're involved in design reviews. Just like we talked about the operations and maintenance of cisterns, we do the same for our landscapes to make sure that we have landscape architects who will design buildings and have plant material that might be too closely spaced together and doesn't always grow in nice geometric patterns. So, or it's maybe too big initially. They're thinking about operations and maintaining and the proper plant communities as well.
This is for Chuck. Do you know what percentage of Statesboro's reused water we're taking for irrigation purposes here?
What percent of states?
What percentage of their water that they're producing are we taking for our irrigation? Any idea?
Well, we're the only entity that's using reused water right now from the city of Statesboro treatment plant.
Mm-hmm.
I know the city is looking at looking at opportunities to provide this to apartment complexes and such, and they want to distribute that to private entities.
I was just wondering how much we're reducing water running into the creeks and what have you. So
I know they're permitted to provide. They have a permit from EPD. They provide X amount of gallons per day, and it's something phenomenal. I don't know what the number is, but we potentially are going to be using 200,000 gallons a day. They have a permit capacity way and above that to provide. So I guess again the important thing is that this water has been treated and going back into the creeks and streams. This gives another chance to recycle that water to be used for irrigation, and also give it a chance to get back in the ground to replenish groundwater.
okay, thank you.
From the different presentations I heard, I think I heard correctly. I heard the 3 types of water, and I'm not an expert, so forgive me if this is common knowledge, but stormwater, rainwater, and reuse water. So of all the types of water, and given all the infrastructure challenges and planning, which is the most beneficial, economical, or does it just depend? This is a general question.
I would probably say stormwater reuse is probably going to be the easiest to implement from an infrastructure and cost perspective. But again, everything's going to be site specific.
Yeah, everything's site specific. Again, we've chosen the route of using reclaimed water, but we just happen to be in a situation where the city of Statesboro had some abandoned pipelines, which reduced the infrastructure costs of getting that water to campus. And just by the nature of our campus being spread out, you know, a lot of cisterns have been very, since we're dealing with Bohemian cisterns, it'd be very expensive for us. So, I mean, every situation is unique. And not every city is, you know, amenable to use water. So every situation is different.
I guess throw a fourth one out there too, and just conservation in terms of being economical, just practices that use less water to begin with would save a significant amount of money, I would imagine.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, the other, fifth, and someone's talked about, and that's building condensation. In the state of Georgia, that water is free. You saw that one picture I had, we just took a garden hose and ran it off the roof and captured it, and then we just toted it around, you know, and, we put it in gator bags around the critical trees and, other, critical landscape material. That's really low-hanging fruit.
And it's produced at the time that you need water. Generally, the condensate comes from the cooling of buildings. We cool buildings in the summer when we're generally in dry or drought conditions. It's a great water source.
You know, there's no magic bullet. All these things, and that's what makes these kind of sessions so important. It's all different ideas and different methods to implement.
Yeah. To the systems, I heard like you have a lot of challenges in making sure that they operate properly. I was wondering how much training to the end user was provided so they can make sure they remain operational. And two, with those challenges, I haven't heard that on the same with the roof gardens. And how does that affect the building envelope? Does it keep its integrity over time? And that's one of the reasons we haven't gone down that road. We're not sure what it's going to do to our building. So we can give some insight into that.
Well, I've got very limited input because at Emory we only have 2 experimental green roofs at this point. There's been 2 challenges there. One is getting our board of trustees to buy into the fact that they will improve building performance. And then the second is our insurer that insures our buildings. They have been very slow to get onto that bandwagon. And now they finally have issued a standard, but we just haven't put any funding to actually doing a live green roof on a building. We have green plazas, elevated plazas, or the parking decks and things, but we don't consider those true green roofs.
Yeah, you actually have a green roof. I told that to Keynote. So you have a basement addition to your Rollins Research Building that connects to the School of Public Health.
Yeah, that's a very
The
good
biochemistry
You're
theory.
right.
So I designed that 12 years ago.
Did you?
So, and no one knows it's a green roof. It's just a plaza with trees and landscape and benches and
Skylights.
skylights.
That is kind of a good
Natural
one.
light.
I didn't think about that.
This message is for Kevin. Kevin, you said that you snuck one in. And how long did it take to put that in? You tied the gutters into it?
We did.
And how long did it take to do it? How much it cost?
That system was installed probably 5 years ago. Cost was roughly close to $10,000 total for the cistern and the pump system. We were going to be irrigating anyway, so I didn't include the irrigation in that system cost. In terms of how much time it took to go in that system, we actually used off-the-shelf tanks that we could get fairly locally. That can be a challenge. There's often a lead time with the type of tank that you use. Sometimes if you're getting large pipes, you look at where they're manufactured. There's some available in the Atlanta area. Some that we looked at had to come from Texas. Others came from other locations. And then when they're large systems, it takes a large trailer to truck those systems to you. So there's time and then other considerations. You think about sustainability, the fuel to truck that a long distance or something. So those are considerations. So in this case, the one that I said kind of went in under the radar for our first kind of foray into cisterns. timing didn't, it wasn't a significant factor or concern, I guess, that we were adding an extra large amount of time because the tank was local. We were fortunate in this location also. It's underground, but it was in an area where we were berming. And the Tate Center was similar in that it was an area where we were requiring a significant amount of fill dirt to sort of create the level landscape that we were intending. So in those two instances, there wasn't a significant extra amount of work to dig out for the cistern. In that case, actually saved a little time and reduced the amount of fill required to fill that area. So those are considerations. I guess I didn't give you a specific time. It might have taken a couple of weeks to get that system in place, and it
I had a question for Howard. When you condensate water the system that you put in place, do you have to treat it just like any of your other water or reuse water as far as analyzing it and treating it before you actually reuse it, the condensate water that you capture?
So the one that was sort of a direct connection from the garden hose, we just took it and squirted our plants. So there was no treatment at all.
So as far as
that water's, I wouldn't drink it, but it's pretty darn clean, I think.
Yeah, it's very clean water.
So as far as EPD is concerned, you don't have to analyze it or treat it before you can reuse it.
I'm just an architect. I don't know.
I think technically the regulations say that condensate water is not supposed to drain to the stormwater system, which is telling me that the state has got some concern with its quality, but I don't think it's ever enforced. I don't know anybody that continually collects it.
Yeah, if you went into a mechanical room in any building anywhere, the condensate pipe goes into the little floor drain.
Well, it's filtered at that point.
Well, it's not filtered, it goes into the drain, it goes into the,
Yeah, if it goes into the
Sanitary
sanitary,
sewer.
that's where it's
Yeah.
supposed to go,
Yeah.
but a lot of times it just goes right to the exterior.
I have a general question for all of you. If you put in a cistern system and hook it to an irrigation system, am I understanding this right? You cannot tie that into the potable water system because of cross connection? I mean, what I'm getting at is if your cistern system runs dry, that means that sprinkler system I have cannot be used without
You can with the you can refill your.
refill the
You could
cistern.
recharge your cistern.
Okay,
with
right.
potable water, yeah.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
you have to.
As long as you had an air gap in there, so there's no
Right.
cross connection.
Do backflow
On
prevention.
reclaimed water that's been treated, coming from the water city treatment system.
You cannot do that.
There can be no
Right.
connection.
Okay, thank you.
I'd say the tank can serve as that air gap. In that case, you can have a refill, a potable water refill connection to your tank, and
Right.
you can set a level to where if it's empty, or if it goes below a certain level, it'll refill
It
to a
takes
certain
over,
level,
right.
say 20%, still leaving capacity for when that rain does come to
Right.
capture that and store it. Another thing we've tried to do, and initially had trouble, and I think the code has actually been rewritten to where we can do an automatic bypass to through a series of check valves in the right places, where you can go directly from city line to the irrigation line that the tank was serving. And I guess the benefit to doing that in my mind would be that you don't need to refill a tank and then use electricity to pump what was pressurized water out of that tank into the system.
Right, and proper backflow processes. But yeah, as far as our reclaimed water, ponds are being used for reservoirs. We still have the deep water wells in place. And those are there for a backup in case the city system went down. We could recharge those ponds from groundwater. Hopefully we won't have to do that.
It's just a general question about permeable concrete and pavers. I've always heard that over time, those porous showers get filled with particulate matter and then it's not as effective over time. So what has your experience been on that?
That's why we've gone with permeable pavers, because the joints between the pavers are backfilled with gravel, and you can vacuum that, you can clean it out. I mean, there is a maintenance regimen you're supposed to do for any pervious material, even concrete. You know, those areas are supposed to be kept clean, street sweepers and such. The problem I have with permeable concrete, and why we don't use it, is because, you know, when that clogs up, you have to cut it out and redo it.
Then you just have non-permeable.
Right, yeah, non-permeable concrete, so, but, permeable pavers, well, we have a campus stand as far as pavers on, for our walkways anyway. So we like it for the aesthetic value, and we like it for that maintenance aspect. But we can pick them up and redo it and put them back in place. And you kind of treat it, when you pick them up and you kind of, heaving that occurs now with just permeable regular pavers, we can pick them up and re-level the area and reinstall them. Concrete, you know, cracks, yes, but concrete cracks.
We're still experimenting with, we have permeable concrete, we have the pavers that Georgia Southern has. You know, there are some people who would argue that in Georgia with our red clay, you know, it can only perform so much and so well. So you really need to have an engineered substrate.
And again, unless you're trying to do stormwater management, stormwater retention, the emphasis really as far as, you know, capturing that first flush, as far as the first quarter-inch rain that lifts up all the oils and impurities off the impervious area. You want to treat that before it gets into the storm sewer systems.
One of the things I've been pushing on campus with very little success is more the permeable parking pavers. So creating parking lots, and those pavers generally tend to have more opening space than the pedestrian pavers. So you're going to get more infiltration, there's less maintenance because you don't necessarily have to use a gravel backfill, you can use a regular soil backfill. So you might get a little bit of vegetation, but that doesn't really matter, and the cars are probably going to kill it anyways, they run over it. I've used it a lot in my previous life on different Army bases, and the stuff works great, but I haven't gotten anybody to buy off on it.
So one thing we've had good success really with a number of different permeable pavers, and if you're concerned about sort of filling in the voids, you can just consider, if you're looking into those options, how it's sited. You know, you don't want a lot of other area to drain onto that permeable paving, or you can design it in such a way that you would minimize the potential for it to clog for other debris and things to wash onto that.
We have a question back there.
Yes, well, after you get a system put in, whether it's inside or out, does it require more labor, someone else to have to run that? Do they have to be certified? With water testing, you have to test the water, is that correct?
Are you talking about like a cistern?
Mm-hmm.
I don't think, we don't test the water.
We're testing our gray water system to ensure water quality, appropriate water quality standards in that system, but not the cisterns. There hasn't been that. There's no certification required. There is a skill set and some experience required in managing and maintaining those. I guess like any system with moving parts, there is some ongoing maintenance required.
But as far as the actual mechanical maintenance has been a separate issue for us. Our grounds crew find the cisterns when they're working to be very easy. So there's been a very small learning curve for those guys. We've just been having problems in the other things.
This is a question for Ivy Scott. As far as behavioral change, you all had mentioned something about environmental residence. Can you talk a little bit more about that and how you get the message out to students?
Most colleges call them eco-refs. So, I mean, I'm sure a lot of colleges have them. They're a pretty big standard. But They kind of work in conjunction with our residence life, more so than now than they did in the past. But there's one, I have one for every hall of every residence hall. So that's only 11, but then I also have an extra 10 to 15 in the organization as well. And so basically what they do is they push out any messaging or like, new things or like exciting things that are happening, or just anything from my office related, anything from energy to waste to, well, anything sustainability basically. So like if we're having contamination issues in our composting in our first year halls, I can go directly to that eco rep in that hall and we can work on the contamination issues specific to that group of 60 students or 30 students, however many. So they've been really beneficial in terms of really like, sectioning down, like even with only 950 students, you still have specific problems and it's much easier to target specific problems, even to the point where like I'll have one of my environmental residents will say like, there's one student on my hall who continually like leaves the water on while she dries her hair or something. And so like, we'll talk about how do you have a conversation with somebody, asking them to change their behavior. How do you approach that subject with somebody you live with and somebody you see every day on campus and maybe work with, or like, do projects with, how do you have a conversation, something very personal and could be touchy. So just things like that. I know it's not to the level of having cisterns and different catchment places in place and things like that. We are working towards that, but when we do, like, we kind of made the decision to say, like, this is our low-hanging fruit for us. This is what makes sense for us. So.
And you shouldn't underestimate your comment there, because I actually think the behavioral shift, we can save 15 or 20% easily in water and energy, all of our utilities, just by behavior. That's actually the lowest hanging fruit. No technology whatsoever. And we do it, everybody in this room does it in their house. You turn off your water, turn off your lights, because you're paying the bill. And, but we go in a hotel, we're less conscientious sometimes because we're not paying the bill. Live in a university dorm or work in an academic building or administrative building, we're not paying the bill. So it's, the behavior thing is huge, and I commend you for the graphics from the program. I don't know who does those graphics, but they're spectacular. And just getting that word out, it's wonderful.
It's really difficult to bridge the disconnect between this idea of, especially on a residential campus, like, they aren't paying bills. When I moved away from campus and now that I'm, attempting to be an adult and paying my own bills, it's a lot different. You think about those things, as I'm sure all of you know, but, even the students who live in the apartments, they still pay just housing fees based on Agnes Scott, not to the apartment complex, and so they don't receive a monthly bill for anything. The college pays for it. So it's almost like, an extra 4 years with mom and dad. So that's difficult. That's definitely a challenge.
That brings up a good point. I had a student come to me the other day, and at the beginning of the semester, I get a ton of requests to meet and talk about different things, mostly in the building. So this young lady comes to me, and she had just moved into her first off-campus apartment, paying her own bills, all that sort of stuff, and she wanted to come and talk to me about what I thought was going to be green building. And so she comes in and she said, can you tell me about some of the energy conservation, water conservation things that are in these buildings? And so I did, and she said, well, why don't people just turn off the faucet? Why don't people just turn off the light? Why is this so hard? And like, she really started to get really emotional about it, because now, and her background on that is like she's really learning the true value of the utility. Just it was a little eye-opening that a student is having that level of awareness.
Well, I think you have the same situation with recycling on campuses, and students are being very proactive. And the students, I think, actually make a much bigger impact than faculty or staff people, because you're sort of at the grassroots level to do things. We had students that started the game day recycling program, and it's amazing the amount of waste stream that they're capturing and recycling, and it's just spectacular.
We have time for one, maybe two more questions.
Yeah, I've walked on Agnes Scott's campus, and it seems like around that chapel
Mhm.
some kind of rain
It is.
catching or
It is.
bioswale? Is
It's
that-
a rain garden, yeah.
is
So,
that-
I forgot to mention, push for time for us, but, we did work with UGA and College of Environment and Design, and they've created a sustainable landscape guideline for us, and so that is something we'll be implementing. So surprisingly, they did a lot of sort of like, research and surveys with the student body and with faculty and staff about, how do certain spaces on campus make you feel, and do you want to, intentional planning, things like that. A large number of students said that they really felt very comfortable in the rain garden area of the chapel and going there. And we were excited by that because we hadn't really had the conversation with students. That's more native planting, that is intentional rain garden, and so that was exciting for us to see that those are the sorts of things that we can implement across campus. And if you've been to Agnes Scott, our aesthetics are the most important thing. We always say if we can get a student to the campus, then she'll be at Agnes Scott in the fall. So we always think about our green grass and things like that, but to know that our students and alums are okay with these different systems and that maybe look a little different or have different plants than what they've seen before, that was exciting for us. That'll definitely make a big impact.
And I'd actually like to throw out just one last question, and that's, I think funding is always on folks' mind, and especially right now, changes in our budget system and funding for education. So are there any suggestions that you have or resources you know of that you could suggest to others for identifying funding for water conservation projects, or even just justifying the upfront costs and how you can possibly get that payback?
I think for schools in the Atlanta area, just with the water prices continually going up, especially it seems at Emory that sometimes the dollar is the almighty driver. And if you can parlay it into true water or cost savings, then that'll make people use faster.
At Agnes Scott, we are committed to start what's called a revolving fund. So any renovation projects, whether they're water or energy or even the money that we might get from selling our recycling as a fund, would go into this revolving fund, and that would then fund projects on campus, and the savings from those projects, whether they're conservation of water, energy efficiency, would go back into the fund and then be reused again into another project. We've actually committed to being very strict about how we track our savings. So I think that's hard. I know it's hard for energy. We haven't delved into water yet, but to sort of how do you track the amount that you're saving? You have degree days and different things, and I'm not an engineer, so I don't know a lot, but that's a difficult process. But sort of making that commitment to designating the funds, that's going to be a big and exciting thing for us, and will be ultimately sustainable beyond my fellowship, beyond my director's tenure at the college. So.
Yeah, I would say, Carly, another way to think about it, there was federal money out there, ARRA money, and a lot of that was for energy. So there was money for the state, it got distributed to the state institutions, and a lot of it was for changing out light fixtures and electric things. Well, if you think about Georgia, our electricity is generated by water. So by making those types of changes, you're impacting, there is water conservation directly associated with that. A lot of people don't necessarily make that direct connection. In Atlanta, they're talking about a streetcar, with exposed wires, which are visually intrusive, in my opinion, and you need water to generate electricity. Why not use renewable? So I think, thinking about if you can reduce electricity, you will directly reduce water and the processing. The other part to that, depending on where you live, I know there are conversations in Georgia and in the state, in the city of Atlanta, that with this conservation and the drought, they've raised rates. And now they want to look at, because they charge for sewage treatment, as an example. So, we have this 1 million gallon cistern. Well, all of a sudden they're losing a revenue stream because we're saving 6,000 gallons a day in toilet flushing. So they need to capture that somehow. So either all our taxes will go up, or they'll tax people who are doing the right thing. So I'm not quite sure. So it is a double-edged sword to a certain extent.
Play off of that, if you, as far as whether reclaimed water is a possibility or not in your area. And that's a conversation you need to generate with your city and see if that is a possibility. Because again, I know these wastewater treatment plants, they have certain requirements they have to meet as far as to get their permit, as far as conservation from EPD. So there may be some incentives that they have, and they might be very amenable to looking into bringing recycled, reclaimed water to your campus. If it's any remotely, remote way feasible. And they've got funding options too, low interest loans and such. And so, just a conversation about what we have here. City reps.
I do know of GFA, the Georgia Environmental Facilities Authority, has some funding for water conservation for local governments, I believe. So if there's some way to work with your local cities or communities to help them get that funding and possibly can benefit your campus, that's possibly what I think we're looking into. But we've got to get out of this room, so let's go ahead and thank our panelists.